Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. Curry, one-on-one. Irving puts it up. It's good. Kyrie Irving from downtown. The three, steps back, crossover, puts up a three. Rebound James. Second. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Cleveland, this is for you.
What's going on, Cavs fans? It's Skylar Wepker and Kevin Lynch from The Block, The Shot, The Stop, a Blue Wire podcast covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, and a little more somber today, coming at you a little bit later than immediately after the game. You know, obviously we're dads before we're Cavs fans, and we had to cut off dad commitments today. But a little bit more somber as we talk about the Cavs dropping to the Orlando Magic and kind of a tight game. You know, 108 to 103, ending our 16-game winning streak. Kevin, what were your main takeaways kind of watching this game, reviewing the box scores? What'd you see?
So I'm going to tell you what I saw in a perfect analogy happened today, right? As you said, we were both dadding earlier in the day. That's why we put it off till this evening. Well, my daughter was, just for reference, because it's important to the story, in our household, we call passing gas putt-putts, just as a cute little thing with our kids, right? So my daughter is giving a Irish performance for St. Patrick's Day for us, doing all this, and she's just passing gas. And my wife goes to her like, Maddie, are you putt-putting? And she goes, concentrate on the people, not the putt-putts. And my analogy is the people are the 24-25 Cavs. The putt-putts are today's performance, right? Don't really focus on today's performance, because we have almost 70 games worth of data to show it's an anomaly. It's happened a couple of times this year where they were just, frankly, they were incredibly poor offensively the last three quarters of the game. Against part of that is Magic are one of the better defensive teams and one of the worst offensive teams. But their shooting numbers, and we'll get into all of it, but it's like so far below their average, and especially what they've been in the 16-game winning streak, that they had a really bad day at the office shooting the basketball. It happens. Yeah,
it seems like that happens, especially when these winning streaks get as lengthy as the Cavs have. You know, by the time they get to 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, like I think maybe the luster wears off, and as you said, kind of the slumps or the poor shooting nights find their way in. I also think this is at this point in the season, the Cavs really aren't playing for all that much. I mean, The only thing left up in the air is the number 1 overall seed, which isn't locked at this point, but I mean, game by game, we get closer to being locked. I mean, I think the magic number is down to 8, and the magic number for the number 2 seed is 2. So, Orlando is playing for something. They're still in the fight. They're still in the hunt. They're still kind of a play-in team at this point. So you don't feel as bad. The loss doesn't weigh as much as, maybe if we were a lot closer to Boston, if Evan Mobley were out there tonight, it probably would feel a little worse.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we'll get into kind of the individual performances and everything. I'm going to throw a couple like numbers out that kind of back up what both you and me are saying, right? So the first quarter, they were fantastic. Came out, I think they had as much as a 15-point lead in the first quarter, maybe even more. They shot 16 of 26, 62%. They were 2 of 6 on threes. Very, very good quarter. Cavs style quarter. From then on, the last 3 quarters, they shot 24 of 70, 34%, and then 8 of 32 for 25% from 3. And I wanted to, I just had it up, compare that against like their season averages. They're somewhere almost at 50%. I'll get the exact numbers here in a second, but they're at close to 50% from field goal percentage in general, and they're over 40% from 3. So that kind of tells you how just bad, bad, and how rare of a bad offensive performance this was.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a reverse of a lot of the Cavs games that we saw that we've been getting lately, where kind of putzing through the first 3 quarters and then lighting it up in the fourth quarter to take the win. It was kind of an opposite of that, like lighting it up in the first quarter and then putzing through the last 3.
Yeah, and I kind of thought that would happen, because they played really bad in the second and third quarter, but they still had a 1-point lead going into the third quarter. And then they came out there at the beginning of the fourth. I think that was maybe the one thing that was frustrating is they made a little run at the beginning of the fourth and opened the game up a little bit. They got up to like an 8 or 9 point lead, and then they gave it back again. So, like I said, pretty frustrating. Frustrating day, but in a season where we don't have many frustrating days, so you just kind of chalk it up, right? I made the title of this "The Sky is Falling" very tongue in cheek, because if you go online, if you go online and search through the right posts and everything, you would have no idea that this loss dropped the Cavs to 56-11.
I know, like it also like. Just the way that Kenny coached that fourth quarter, it's a tight game, especially right at 40 seconds left or whatever, and the Magic go up. Kenny doesn't call a timeout. He kind of lets these guys play it through. Like he finished the game 2 timeouts remaining, so it didn't feel like a game that Kenny really. I don't want to say cared, but like a game that Kenny felt, all right, it's okay if we lose this one. We don't need a game to go into overtime this late in the season for a season that we pretty much have locked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we should have probably said off the top, we buried the lead a bit. Evan Mobley did not play today, minor foot injury. We don't know if it's an actual foot injury or if that's just an excuse to get him a day's rest. Either way, does not seem like a concern at all. But him not playing this game obviously had a major impact. To be honest, he probably would have guarded Paolo Banchero, who had a really poor offensive day. He ended up with 24 points, 11 rebounds, but shot 6 of 22. They actually did a really good defensive job on him. Franz Wagner had a much more, or he had a little bit better game. Or he had as good a game, but a little bit more efficiently, I should say. But I other thing, kind of want to stay on the Cavs offense for a minute. The other thing that kind of stood out to me is one of the very few games all year where they kind of got too reliant on the backcourt, on Garland, especially Mitchell. Mitchell took 28 shots, Garland 16. So between the two of them, they took 44 to 96 shots. That's a little bit higher percentage than normal. I'm sure some of that's attributed to Mobley not playing, but Mitchell taking 28 shots on a game where he's coming back after having a couple games off, like with his own minor injury. And honestly, the other thing about Mitchell is he looked tired in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter. I was kind of surprised by that. And I checked how many minutes he played. He played 34 minutes, which is a couple minutes above his average, but I guess just having a couple days off where he probably didn't do any conditioning to rest his groin injury, like, I don't know, made him kind of lose his wind a little bit much earlier than he normally would.
Yeah, and paired with kind of a poor shooting day from him in general. I mean, 9 of 28, pretty poor. Where Garland at least got it, 8 of 16, shot about 50% on the floor, which is good because he's been coming out of this slump that he's been poor shooting and whatnot. So yeah, you don't want to see Mitchell kind of hucking up 28 shots, playing 34 minutes when he's coming off of, like you said, missing a few games with a groin injury, probably not conditioning at all during that. I don't know if maybe this game, they were treating this game as a ramp-up game to the West, but I don't know, the teams that you're playing in the West really aren't playing for anything. The Clippers aren't playing for nothing. Suns aren't playing for nothing. Jazz aren't playing for nothing. I'm not sure how they're treating the Mitchell piece, but with Mobley being out, the only thing of concern that showed is how thin they are at the 4 or 5 spot, because your next guy up was Tristan Thompson, which Cavs legend, great locker room guy. I don't need Tristan Thompson at 34 years old putting in serious minutes.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised they even played Tristan 11 minutes today, because there's some data where of 4 or 5 of Dean Wade and DeAndre Hunter, they've only done it a little bit, but is actually pretty deadly. Now the Magic are a pretty big team that might not have been the team to do that lineup against, but Tristan's not going to give you a ton, as you see in the stat performance tonight. I did think with no Mobley, I thought we'd see a little bit more Dean Wade. He did play 22 minutes. I thought he played fine. He didn't get many opportunities offensively, but contributed in other areas. And again, anomaly. The last podcast we covered like how amazing Sam Merrill's been the last 6 weeks. Sam Merrill went 1 for 7 from 3 today, like as he's been shooting 50% over the last 6 weeks. So that just goes to the anomaly stuff. I mean, Donovan Mitchell's a 40% free throw or 3-point shooter, and he was 3 for 14 from 3 today. Basketball is a game of variability, and things like this happen. And so I think you brush it off. And honestly, even in the playoffs, they're probably going to have a game where they just played terrible offensively and lose. I mean, it's just something that can happen in basketball, and you just have to move on. And most importantly, do what the Cavs have done all year, like respond and, start another win streak on Tuesday.
Yeah. And like I said, I think that with us having the padding and the gap between Boston, like, it's okay to have these stinkers or these clunkers when they mean nothing.
Right.
If it's, hey, we're only a game on Boston and this was on paper a very winnable game, then it stings a little bit more. But having I think it was 9 game, now it's down to 8, or maybe it was 8, now it's down to 7.5, something like that. Still having that good lead on Boston this late in the season, have pretty much the 1 seed locked up. You feel okay losing, the paper win.
Yeah. I mean, Boston's actually been playing pretty good basketball. And they haven't been able to make up any ground. Actually, the Cavs have, lengthened things out since the All-Star break. I mean, since the All-Star break, the Celtics are 10-3. And the Cavs have increased their lead by 2 games on them. Yeah. I mean, that's literally how good the Cavs have been. I don't even think the Celtics, even though it's mathematically a possibility, I don't even think they're pushing for that number 1 seed. I think that thing is a foregone conclusion. I think the biggest thing for the Cavs is finding the balance of playing enough to stay in rhythm while making sure, guys get rest when they need it. You try different lineups that you may want to use in the playoffs against certain teams when the opportunity presents itself. And, you don't want to, even if you're the number 1 seed, you don't want to go into the playoffs, closing the season, 5-10 or something like that. You want to keep winning, but still focus on winning while, making sure all that other stuff comes into focus so that you can be 100% ready for the playoffs.
So one question that I have, for you and our listeners and everything is that, we've seen this team's at its best when they're consistently playing. Like a good example was like we felt like they in the beginning of the first half of the year they were playing like every day for 2 months. Where they pack a lot of games in a certain span. This team seems like the rust collects pretty quickly. The rest isn't like this is a team that keeps their momentum going. And I'm curious if like having that first round bye or waiting for the play in to finish up, like if that hurts us, hinders, changes anything. What are your thoughts on that?
I got some stats to prove how right you are. The Cavs have the best record in league by far in the second game of back-to-back, which leads right into your thing. Like they play better. They play better when they play a lot and are in rhythm, more so when they get extra rests. So they have the best record in the league when they play on the second game of consecutive days. They have the second best record in the league when they have 1 day rest between games, which is what today was. They have tied for the best record in the league when they have 2 days rest, 8-2. Now, some of that's just going to be skewed because the team wins all the time, right? And
yeah, I mean, there's 11 losses.
But especially the second game of back-to-back, like OKC, who has almost the identical record of the Cavs, they're 9-5 in the second game of back-to-back. Boston's 7-4. So, I think that leads perfectly into your points that this is a rhythm team, especially because how much movement they do on offense, how many threes they shoot, all these kind of things. And maybe that could even be a little bit of concern because in the playoffs, you don't play quite as often. You often have 2 games in between days or something. So maybe that's something that the Cavs, I'm sure they are aware of and try and address. How do they keep their rhythm when they're playing a little bit less often?
And, tonight could just be, like you said, with Donovan Mitchell coming off of an injury. He probably didn't condition at all while in there, but it seems like his rhythm was off. Like I said, the shooting numbers weren't there. Became very ball dominant, ball heavy, versus like what we've always seen. And so, maybe this is an overreaction, but it's something to bring up with, a theme that we've seen all season is that this team, when they sit for, a week, whatever, like they seem to the rust builds quicker on them versus probably any other team that I can remember.
Yeah, I think you're right. And kind of as you touched on Mitchell, and I think we both kind of said he just looked rusty and looked a little bit like, under conditioned today, just like tired. Some good like shooting stats. Like, so in the first and third quarter, so to start the game and to come out of halftime when he got plenty of rest, he was a combined 5 for 9 from the floor. Right. Mm-hmm. In the second and fourth quarter, once the legs get a little bit more tired and everything, he was a combined 4 for 18. So, like a little bit interesting because Donovan Mitchell's obviously an incredibly conditioned athlete and everything, but I don't know if, and maybe he'd been nursing an injury where he hadn't been conditioning as much even before he sat out the last couple of games. But for whatever reason, he was obviously off. You can see that by the stats, and he looked unexpectedly tired at the end of the first half, and especially at the end of the game. And that, more than anything else coming out of the game, is the only thing you should really worry about. How can we make sure that he is ready to fully ramp up and ready to go for the playoffs when you're probably going to want him to play closer to 40 minutes?
Same thing with Evan Mobley. Like this foot thing could be precautionary, but you don't want it to become a discussion point, to become something that national media start talking about, because then they're going to say, they're going to call it every which way as soon as they start noticing this trend.
Sure. One more kind of overall thing about the Cavs, then we can get into a couple of players before we preview the Clippers on Tuesday night. But they, what did you think about the rotations from today's game? Meaning, like, they have Hunter start for Mobley. They'd kind of been rotating, when a starter's been out, who starts and everything. And then, those 5 starters played a lot. Like, Jerome played 24 minutes, but I thought he was playing so well he could have even got a little bit more playing time. We talked about Tristan with 11 minutes. Okoro didn't play much. Javonte Green didn't play. I expected to see him with Evan Mobley out. Do you have any thoughts on kind of the rotation and, the minute distribution from today's game?
So I agree on the Javonte Green. I'm surprised that they went Tristan Thompson instead of Javonte Green. Like you said, they kind of, I don't want to say small ball lineup, but I would say like mid-sized lineup. Yeah. with Dean Wade and DeAndre Hunter, and then throwing Javonte Green in there. I'm curious. I mean, like I said, we kind of watched the game after the dad activities, but Isaac Okoro with 8 minutes, but 8 minutes with a negative 13 plus minus. So
yeah, I don't know
if that was just getting outmatched.
I think sometimes when you play that little, the plus minus can be deceiving too, right? So like like sometimes it can tell a tale, but sometimes you could just happen to be in the game when the other team gets a run, and then you don't get to get back in the game where the plus minus might even out. It's like, because I think Okoro was in at the beginning of the second quarter when Orlando came back after the Cavs opened up the big lead at the end of the first quarter. But sorry, please go ahead. I was just kind of I noticed that too about the -13, and I think that might be a little bit misleading for Isaac today.
Yeah, and normally he's on the best player on the other team, or guarding the best player, which in this case is Paolo, who didn't have a great shooting night, but he's such a good athlete and just does everything, and it has the size and length. So I was curious about that piece, and then just like you've seen these guys having not great shooting numbers, like Sam Merrill didn't shoot very great. DeAndre Hunter didn't shoot very great at all, 2 for 11.
Right.
Why not kind of put in Jalen Tyson at some point and try some stuff? Like we said, this game doesn't really matter in this point of the season, how the season has gone. And like you alluded to, like this is the time to try some stuff. So yeah, I was very curious on kind of either minutes distribution, who was in, who was out. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was a little bit surprised that he went with Tristan Thompson even for 11 minutes. I guess thinking about it after the fact, Orlando plays one of the bigger lineups in the league, and so it might be tough to do, like you said, small ball 5 against them, depending on who they had in the game. I mentioned Ty. I thought Ty was playing really, really well tonight, but I think that was just a numbers thing with him, Mitchell and Garland, both playing, and not wanting to run the 3-guard lineup with all 3 of them against Orlando because of their size and everything. I can understand why Kenny would think that. But otherwise, like like I said, the biggest thing was like Javonte Green not playing. I thought we might see a little bit more of Dean Wade with Mobley out. I actually liked the game Dean played, even though he only went 1 for 2 from the floor. He grabbed 6 rebounds. He had 3 steals. He didn't have any assists, but it seemed like he was having a really good passing game. Attack, like kind of broke down the defense and kicked out a couple of times. I was actually surprised to see he didn't have any assists. So, but yeah, I mean, again, not the end of the world. I just it seems to be running short on time if they're going to try and incorporate Javonte Green into like a real rotation piece for the playoffs. Right. And I just thought today might have been an opportunity to do that.
I agree that today would have been the day to do that. And I don't know, maybe he's still shaken up from the rough foul from 2 nights ago. The other piece of this game that probably could have swung this game is the free throw percentages. I mean, 65% is not great. I know a lot of it's on Ty Jerome being 1 for 4, but just having a higher free throw percentage, I think that changes the landscape of how this game kind of played out, because it really did go down to that final minute where the Orlando got a lead, and then kind of the Cavs couldn't buy a bucket to either tie it or get the lead back. So then they just had to foul, and that's kind of where how the game ended. But yeah, one of those games that we can just kind of get on out of here, get on a plane, and get over to LA.
Yeah, and just to drive home, I think that was the free throw shooting we hadn't talked about enough. Yes, a little bit of rough game, and kind of as we were saying earlier, this being an anomaly of a game. Just a lot of things happen that don't, in a bad way, that usually happen in a good way. Ty Jerome's an 89% free throw shooter that went 1 for 4 today. I mean, there's might not be another game the rest of the season or even next season that you see Ty Jerome shoot 25% from the free throw line.
God, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope I watch Ty Jerome next season in White and Gold.
we all do. But yeah, I mean, definitely not super worried at all about the loss today. Just I don't worry about today at all. I worry about what's going to happen these next 2 or 3 games. As long as they kind of get back into a rhythm, prove, they just won 16 games in a row where they scored 105 points or more. I think 15 of the 16, they scored 110 points or more. And they scored 103 today. They lost 108, 103. They had a very good offensive team, had a bad offensive night. It happens.
Yep, it does. And so the best thing you do is get on a plane, like I said, and get on out to LA so that we can kind of preview the Clippers game coming up. This is a team that I don't know what to make of, to be honest.
I don't think they do
underachieving. Yeah, I don't know if it was real or if I was getting trolled on Twitter, but they only had like 200 fans at a game the other night. I don't know if that was real. That's
not real. Not in that brand new stadium. Like people go at the very least to see that arena, if not see the Clippers. And they're a borderline playoff team, or they're at least a play-in team right now. They're in the 8th spot, so I can't imagine in LA them not getting any fans coming to a game.
Yeah, so I was definitely
unless Steve Ballmer got canceled and I'm not aware of it. That's the only thing I can think of.
To those that don't know, I build like websites and stuff as a day job, and Steve Ballmer used to be the guy from Microsoft or the CEO or whatever. And these tech companies, they always put out like events and conferences or whatever, and he just gets up there sweating profusely and just goes, developers, and it's just like the only thing I will ever know Steve Ballmer for.
Oh no, that's funny. Yeah, the Clippers are an interesting team. I think in a lot of ways you can say they overachieved depending on what people depending on what you thought of them coming into this season. I think a lot of people had negative connotation that this team might even fall out of the play-in altogether. They were in the 4 or 5 spot in the playoffs for a bulk of the year, and then slid a little bit here the last month or two. And I think the biggest thing about them, they're not a great offensive team. They're a pretty good defensive team, and they play significantly better at home than they do on the road. And we're going there to play them. They're 22-10 at home, 15-20 on the road. So, I think it's definitely not a walkover game for the Cavs. I think they're gonna, have their hands full with this Clippers team, and I hope we have everyone on deck playing, and that they kind of find their offensive rhythm that they've had for the bulk of the season.
Yeah, I hope they have everybody, because I think a matchup of Kawhi Leonard and Evan Mobley, like that's going to be a really, really good matchup. I'm sure that's what the defensive assignment will be for the Cavs, at least. So we'll see. They have James Harden, who I would not say is the James Harden that we all remember in Houston by any means, but he's not a bum. He's not
no,
coming off the bench yet. He's still putting in good minutes, good stats in general. I mean, he's averaging about 8.5 assists a game. So he's still doing well out there. They also got the Ben Simmons, who the Cavs were tied to in the buyout market, and thank God went to LA and didn't come to Cleveland.
Very true. Yeah, I mean, part of the Clippers slide has been like, as you said, their 2 best players this year, with Kawhi being out so much of the year, were James Harden, who was a borderline all-star, and then Norm Powell, also potential all-star this year, who was phenomenal. And then he's been hurt, and I believe he just came. I think he's coming back today, if I remember, if I heard that right. So they may be close to full strength on Tuesday. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, but it looks like from the last couple of games, they have everyone for the most part healthy, and they're playing at home. So like I said, this could be a tough start. And West Coast trips are always tough, right? I mean, we talked about the one right around New Year's, how it was going to be tough, and then they went like 5-0 on it.
They swept the whole West Coast.
Right. And a lot of them in deciding fashion. But yeah, so it'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how much of the game I stay awake for and have to watch in the morning.
Yeah, for real. I mean, out of this West Coast trip, like, LA might be the only team actually fighting for something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're pretty much right at the 8 seed. I mean, they're still 2 games behind Minnesota and 4 games up from the 9 seed. So maybe the 7th seed is their ceiling. So you're facing a team that's kind of playing for something. Which always adds something, especially this late into the season.
For sure. I mean, they don't play as challenging of opponents as you said from their last West Coast trip that they swept, but it's always tough going out there, and especially if it seems like we might have some guys either a little bit dinged up or just the time of year that they want to get them some rest. So we'll see how full the Cavs, how full their kind of roster is for each game. And yeah, I mean, they obviously can beat any of these teams on this trip. But realistically, I would like them to come back after this trip, no matter what their record is, that the number 1 seed is for all intents and purposes done. We don't even have to think about it anymore. And then that last about 9 or 10 game stretch of the year is all about setting them up for the playoffs.
No doubt. I definitely agree. So with that, I think it's safe to get out of here. If you're checking us out for the first time or just finding us, please leave us, a like, subscribe on any of your podcast app of choice. We're all over them. Please leave a 5-star review. That really, really helps us in the algorithm and just kind of gets us out there a little more. Thank you to Blue Wire for letting us do all of this. Follow us on all the socials. Connect with us. We'd love to respond to fans. We'd love to hear what you guys are feeling. So with that, he's Kevin Lynch. I'm Skylar Webker. Tim Daniel is out there somewhere. And have a good night.
Go Cavs.